Welcome to Living Your Big Bold Life, Lisha. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you all about everything thyroid today.
We haven't had a guest on this topic, and so I've been so impressed with your material on Instagram, and I just feel like this is such an important topic for so many of us, and I'm honored to have your time today. Especially, can I just highlight something? Leisha has a 3-month-old, and for anyone who's at a newborn, this is a time where, like, 3 months, you're just, like, treading water. And so I'm really, really honored that you have been able to make time to do this today.
Yeah, absolutely. I really, as we'll probably talk about, I love my career. I love what I do. And when I'm able to kind of incorporate that, I'm slowly getting back to a normal routine, but also trying to take time for baby and husband. Like we said, it's a learning curve, but trying to enjoy all the different aspects, ups and downs of being a new mom.
Yeah, it's a lot. I was sharing this with you before the interview, but before we dive in, the thing I always encourage new moms about is that they a lot of times will see moms with multiple babies or multiple kids and they'll say, I just don't know how you do it. This is a lot. And just a reminder to everyone listening out there, if you are a new mom and you are juggling all the things, don't think it's abnormal to feel a little bit overwhelmed, and it's not less work when you only have one. It's really not. And especially, there's so many shifts going on. I mean, I'm sure your career's
Mhm.
shifting right now. Your family dynamic, you and your husband, that's a big shift for you, right? And now there's a new baby and you're learning. So just a little encouragement for all the newborn mamas out there, and especially new moms, that just because a few of us have more than one, it doesn't mean we're any better at it, or that it's any easier for us than it is for you. So, anyways, let's get started. So, why are you so passionate about thyroid health, and what brought you to this? Was this because you had thyroid issues yourself, or why are you even doing this today?
Yeah, I actually really love that question because it allows me to tell a little bit about my story and, like you said, why I even got into this very specific area. So, yes, I do have thyroid issues myself. Back in 2017, I was diagnosed with both Hashimoto's and
Okay.
hypothyroidism. And I'm more than happy to kind of explain what those are, what the difference is between the two, because I think they're often confused. Um, so, 2017, a routine doctor checkup. I was feeling quote unquote fine, but my blood work came back and there was a lot of things wrong. Not only was my thyroid severely underactive, but I had like my cholesterol was off, my liver enzymes were off, and this at the time, and I still am, I was a registered dietitian. So I knew how to take care of myself. I was eating
Right.
well, I was very active. But it wasn't until after the diagnosis that, hindsight is 2020, I realized, wow, my college years and early 20s were rough. And it
Mhm.
really explained so many of my symptoms and struggle to, just kind of get by. And I think we do this a lot. I think women more so, but we chalk things
Yes.
up to stress and to being busy. And at the time, like I said, being in college, working multiple jobs, having an internship. Of course, I was going to be tired, but I didn't realize
Mhm.
that that wasn't normal to feel that level of fatigue or have anxiety or these different issues that I random things kept popping up, like problems with gut health, or my oral health suffered. There were so many things, and it wasn't until I was diagnosed and got training and education later that I realized all the pieces were connected. And then it started all to make sense. So, diagnosed in 2017, at the time, I was a clinical dietitian, or yes, a clinical dietitian, working at the hospital, working on transitioning to outpatient wellness center. And that's where I started to work with more of a chronic illness population. So I was seeing people with thyroid disease and autoimmunity. And I just realized that I wanted to learn more, not only to help myself, but my clients that I was working with and my
Yes.
patients. So I decided to get extra training and become an integrative and functional practitioner, because as dietitians, we're not really taught a whole lot about autoimmune diseases or thyroid problems. It's kind of glossed over. And I think that also happens in the conventional medicine realm. It's
Mm-hmm.
definitely dismissed and not treated like something that is a big deal, when in reality it's a huge deal for our health. So that's kind of like the gist of, why I realized that the care was really poor.
Yes.
After diagnosis, the follow up care is extremely poor. Um, Alternative means are not offered. Patients
Mm-hmm.
aren't referred to a dietitian, and even if they are, most dietitians, like I said, we're not trained, much about thyroid disease. So the typical dietitian doesn't know how to help a thyroid patient specifically. So, through helping myself, getting trained, I wanted to better help other people in my shoes, because it just wasn't acceptable to me, for
Right.
people to be so, discouraged and dismissed and lost really on how to help their own bodies.
Wow, I just love that you said I've kind of found some tools that are working for me. I'm going to go help some other people. And I think that that's the interesting thing I find with health and wellness today is that there's kind of two factors. Some people need to make the decision to make their health a priority. And then, however, then there's a lot of people out there that are making their health a priority, but they have the wrong tools and they're being told the wrong things, and or
Mm-hmm.
no one knows how to help them. And so I think that's so fascinating that you saw that there was this gap, like, yes, I am a dietitian, but there are still some things that I need to go figure out in the kind of functional nutrition world that could help others. So, oh, that's fascinating. Well, I have many things I want to ask you about that, but our thyroid? Let's just get basic first. What is
Mm-hmm.
our thyroid and what does it really control? What impact does it make on our body?
Yeah, so the thyroid is an endocrine gland, meaning it's a gland that
Okay.
secretes hormones. It's often called the butterfly gland because of its shape.
Oh,
It's located in our neck. It's not that big, but it does control many important vital functions in our body. Most people know it to control our metabolism. That's why when you have low or high thyroid, it can influence your ability to gain or lose weight. More people
right.
have hypothyroidism, so usually you hear people complain about a lot of weight gain or weight loss resistance. So metabolic health is a primary thing that the thyroid controls, along with things of like energy production and heat production and utilizing the nutrients from our diet, and even cognitive health. Oftentimes they find out they have a thyroid condition because they first had depression, and if the doctor is
Oh,
savvy enough, they'll kind of investigate a little bit further. So it does impact our brain health, which is super important. Your mental health.
totally.
So those are kind of the big areas, and those can stem. Metabolic health covers so many different things, but also can influence sex hormones, which is really important for women,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to fertility and pregnancy, and premenopause, postmenopause, things like that as well. All of these hormones do influence each other. You can't just isolate one set
Mhm.
of hormones from the other hormones that our body has, because that's not really how it works.
Well, that's fascinating. And you realize why, in your really thorough description, why the thyroid is so important for so many different areas. So let's dive into when you see people who are struggling with, who maybe are a red flag for thyroid issues. Let's
Mm-hmm.
go into certain symptoms that you see, and you already talked about some of them about that you
Mm-hmm.
were experiencing. But if I have a listener today, and obviously they all know we're not providing medical advice today, but we are just
Mm-hmm.
sharing kind of from experience, What symptoms do you see when someone is having issues with their thyroid? Kind of those red flags.
Yeah, I can definitely give a list, and then also I like to point out that a lot of these symptoms overlap with other conditions. So I'll try and clarify that as well. But the most common ones are weight loss resistance. And this is for hypothyroidism and underactive thyroid. So weight loss resistance, extreme fatigue, brain fog, low energy, like I mentioned. There can be other issues with your lab work. Like I said, for myself, I mean, once upon a time, they actually used elevated cholesterol to diagnose hypothyroidism. So,
Oh,
your cholesterol may not just be diet and lifestyle. It could be something wrong with your thyroid. And that happened to me, like I said. There can be aches and pains with your muscles or your joints. Another common one is hair loss or dry skin, brittle nails, loss of the outer third of your eyebrow. It's very thin. That can also
ah,
be due to, an underactive thyroid. Cold hands and feet, super common one as well. If you feel like you can't regulate your body temperature, or even I've heard, and sometimes have experienced myself, like heat intolerance. You can't stand the cold and you can't stand the heat. So you feel like
right.
you're very high maintenance when it comes to like
Yes.
weather that you can tolerate. Mood swings, that's another common one. Also, carb intolerance. So, like maybe swings in your blood sugar that are a little bit more extreme than the normal person might experience. So those are the most common ones that I see, that I've experienced, that are related to thyroid.
And I think these are all some of the things that we see, especially women, but men too, that we hear about.
Mm-hmm.
I can't lose the weight. Doing all the things, but nothing's working. I have brain fog. I'm tired all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Started to see some hair loss. I mean, these are things that we hear a lot, and it very well, if you're listening today, it could be an issue with your thyroid. So
Mm-hmm.
let's dive into, we could talk about the different kind of other thyroid issues, but when you see this patient, this is the thing, you talk to this client and they're coming to you, and what is kind of step one that you like to do? You say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
bet you're seeing weight loss resistance, you're tired all the time, you've got brain fog. What is kind of step one that you say we're gonna focus on?
Yeah, actually, before I do anything really, I always recommend people get a full thyroid panel tested. And this actually goes back to what I
Mhm.
said earlier about describing the difference between hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, and how they're related. So, a full thyroid panel would include more than what your doctor typically tests. So, your doctor normally will test a marker called TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. It's actually a pituitary hormone that communicates with your thyroid gland to release or not release thyroid hormones through a biofeedback mechanism. So TSH, very common, and they should test that. It's not nothing wrong with it. And then the other one is free T4, which is a majority of what our thyroid produces, the T4 hormone, but also what doctors medicate with, usually a
Okay.
synthetic T4 option. You may have heard of Synthroid or levothyroxine. So they're going to test those and kind of call it a day. However, this does not screen for Hashimoto's, which I'll describe. It does not screen for the active thyroid hormone, which is T3. So you are going to be missing some pieces to the puzzle. There's some other markers too. Two antibody markers test for Hashimoto's. There's also something called reverse T3, which can show if you are not converting your inactive thyroid hormones to an active form. And that can happen under stress, infection, illness, different things like that. So, Hashimoto's, why it's important to know that is because it's an autoimmune condition. And it's always important to know if you have autoimmunity going on. Now, doctors won't routinely screen for this because it doesn't change the way that they treat their patients. They're going to say, oh, you have
Mm.
it, doesn't matter. We'll still medicate you, we'll still test your labs routinely. You'll be fine if you take this pill. I've heard that probably every day for the past year. I get messages all the time, people,
Mhm.
telling me this story. And, I was told the same thing. It's not important. But it is because in the
Mm.
functional realm, we understand that autoimmunity is actually an immune system problem. Same thing with
Mhm.
Hashimoto's. factors, usually byproducts of modern living, have
Yeah.
caused the immune system become imbalanced and unfortunately produce antibodies against another part of your body. And in Hashimoto's, it's the thyroid gland. The damage
Got it.
that is done to the thyroid gland can and usually does eventually lead to hypothyroidism. That's why
Okay.
sometimes they're used interchangeably. You can have Hashimoto's without having hypothyroidism, and you can have
Okay.
hypothyroidism without having Hashimoto's.
Mm.
But I really want people, when we first start working together, to know what diagnosis are we even beginning with, because that will determine what kind of treatment path we go down.
I love that you bring up the full thyroid panel because I hear this quite a bit that
Mm-hmm.
their doctors are only testing them for the two basic ones, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the T4 you were saying, is that the one that they're normally doing, not the
Mm-hmm.
T3?
Correct.
And then they're not getting any kind of answers that they really need. And yet when they do the full thyroid panel, the picture becomes more clear of
Mm-hmm.
what's really going on. So listeners, this is a great situation where you do need to be bold. Even if you have a gut feeling, and I
Mm-hmm.
see this over and over. If you have a gut feeling it's your thyroid, but you're not getting a full thyroid panel test from your doctor, you either need to push back on your physician or find a new physician because
Yes.
um, I hear this over and over that they had a gut feeling something was not right. They only would test for a couple. Those didn't show too many issues.
Mm-hmm.
So they were just told, no, it's not your thyroid. But they knew something wasn't right. So and
Yeah.
thank you for kind of clarifying on Hashimoto's being an autoimmune disease.
Mm-hmm.
So step one, they get their full thyroid panel,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're armed with this information, and they need help. They have hypothyroidism, let's say. What is kind of step two that you kind of direct them to?
Yeah, if I'm, it kind of depends on if I'm working with clients one on one or they're going through one of the programs that I've created. So we'll start with the program options. I start with mindset because it's so
Mm-hmm.
important to have the right mindset for healing. I'm not, a therapist or psychologist. I give very general, recommendations, but it's really about believing that, you can assist your body in healing. And a lot of people
Right.
don't believe that or think it's possible because they're told otherwise. They're told they need a medication to heal, or it's actually all in their head and they're not even sick. So, kind of getting past that, false belief, first and foremost, to get in the right headspace, I think is such a crucial part. And understanding that, change takes time, healing takes time. It's gonna be a
Mhm.
lifelong endeavor. It's not a couple months. It's not a 12-week protocol. It's for life. And it's gonna be changing and adapting because you are not the same person you were a year ago, 2 years ago, yesterday. So you have to be
Yes.
very open about the changes that are going to be coming and how you can honor your body and support it. And that baby steps and small steps are what you should aim for, not these huge drastic things that the fitness industry teaches us, and the
Mhm.
diet industry wants us to believe that it has to be extreme, it has to be fast. That rarely works. It rarely lasts more than a short period of time. So, mindset, and then, depending on the client, we might either dive into, everyone's different. Some people have very poor nutrition habits, but great lifestyle habits, or vice versa. So, it kind of depends on what that individual has going on. Some people need a lot of help with rearranging their lifestyle a little bit or improving areas that are harming their health, whether they realize it or not.
Mhm.
And then some people need more help with the nutritional aspect to figure out what type of eating and diet is going to work best for them.
So, one of my favorite sayings is that we are all worthy of more than fast. We are worthy of things that
Mm.
last. And you just nailed that. And on my health journey, on every listener's health journey here today, it does need to be a lifelong endeavor. I just love that you focus on that because anytime there is this pitch of a quick fix, it doesn't last. And it's not really pursuing health. You're
Mhm.
pursuing skinny, you're pursuing something that is really not going to fix you long term. And I look at my journey, and when I kind of released this quick fix mentality and I said, no, I'm just going to start taking steps towards being healthier every single day. And I'm not going to expect that I'm going to see dramatic changes tomorrow. That
Mhm.
is a very freeing moment. And I love that you start there, because if you're not starting there, you might as well just go and try to get a pill for everything, because that's what it's
Right.
being pitched at is this is your
Mhm.
quick fix. This is going to solve everything. And not that medications don't have a role, but I think
Mhm.
that's that mindset of, no, I've got to take steps towards a healthier me each and every day. And so thank you for sharing that so much. Okay, so step 3, what's kind of next is it kind of nutrition and lifestyle from that point forward?
Yeah, and I think within that, it's also about establishing habits, changing
Mm,
behavior. Because if you want it to last a long time, you have to change how you do things. And the most success I see with people, like I mentioned, is small, sustainable things that they can commit to. Because as we know, doing things that are too overwhelming or too much all at once, it's just too hard and it's not realistic. And being a new mom, like this is in my life, has definitely taken that path of, okay, what can I do today? And I make it so easy that it's, you know I can achieve it no matter what, and it might be like a
right.
10-minute walk, or like making sure I drink enough water or something very, very basic. And then you can build upon that. So habit change, behavior, that's so important for anyone who wants lasting changes. And then beyond that, it kind of gets down more into fine tuning, whether that's correcting deficiencies with supplements or tweaking their diet more, or like I said, everyone is so different. So we kind of start
Hmm.
with a big picture and we kind of get more and more like narrow and specific as I get to know the individual more and what they need help with.
It's interesting, and I don't know if you see this a lot, but I do notice that when someone's saying I want to get healthier, they try to change everything overnight, and
Mm-hmm.
then they wonder why they kind of, I don't want to use the word fail, but they don't keep going because
Right.
it's so unsustainable. And then I see the other part of it where someone's trying to do all the things and they're kind of over stressing their body,
Mm-hmm.
and their cortisol spikes, but they're not realizing it. And that's contributing to them not taking steps forward on their health journey, because they think they just have to, like you as a new mom right now, certain new moms think that they just need to, I don't kill themselves with
Mm-hmm.
exercise, and they're not realizing that yes, movement and is healthy and good, but there's a line where you can cross it, that you're doing too much and
Yes.
stressing your body not in a good way, and probably truly affecting your thyroid in a negative way.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I think something else that I try my best to educate patients on too is your body has a hard time healing and improving if it's in a state of fight or flight or stress mode. Like you want to work on
Mm.
making your body feel safe. And sometimes that's mental changes, sometimes it's physical, often it's both. But, that's the biggest thing. I think you mentioned it for yourself too, but giving myself and telling my clients this, like a ton of grace and a ton of
Yeah.
acceptance. And that really was, like you said, super freeing that, there is no timeline for this weight loss. There is no timeline for whatever. It's just every single day doing what you can and being okay with that. And, that I think will release a lot of that mental stress, that extra pressure we put on ourselves. And it really turned my healing journey around and made it almost easy. I wasn't fighting
Yes.
myself anymore. It started to become effortless for the first time in my entire life. So that is a huge piece, a key, aspect that I want people to practice and to embrace and use that in their life, because I really do believe it's a game changer.
I think you're exactly right. And it's finding that peace with you and your journey. And once you find that, it's like kind of the result can be weight loss, it can be healing, it can be sleeping better.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are just stressed out to the max in every area of your life and you're trying to do all these things, it's a lot. And I think that's why there's such this overwhelm by so many out there, right? And I just
Mm-hmm.
love that advice that you're giving. So, I noticed in following you on Instagram that I think a lot of your eating tips and nutrition tips
Mm-hmm.
are forward thinking in a lot of ways when it comes to versus other dietitians out there. And I'm not trying to criticize any dietitians, but I noticed, for instance, you used to work at a hospital. When
Mm-hmm.
I went to deliver my baby in the hospital, um, the food that was recommended to me was disappointing for someone from my perspective. And I respect all different eating lifestyles, but it was a lot of low fat food, but it wasn't naturally low fat food. It was food that had other additives or chemicals. It was a lot of kind of fake filler stuff, like fake butter and fake. And I I'm concerned that people are getting that. They're saying, I'm going to be healthier. And they're
Mm-hmm.
pursuing packaged foods that are portraying, hey, I'm low fat, I'm low calorie, I'm this. And instead of just pursuing real whole food. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's what I've been concerned about when I go to the doctor's office or when I go to the hospital. That's the dietary advice coming towards people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really sad how far behind. Even when I worked in the hospital and gave education for diabetics or for heart disease, knowing what I know now and what we were taught to teach is insane. It's such a difference because we are taught, low fat and low sodium, and a lot of it goes against our biology. Like truly, we need certain
Hmm.
micronutrients and macronutrients to thrive. And, I feel like the goal for a lot of those diet protocols are like weight loss, no matter what the cost. And I just don't believe that that's the right way to go. It's not healthy. It's more about what you're taking away versus what you're adding into your diet. So I really like the approach of like, what can we put into your diet that's going to help you heal versus what are we just going to strip away? Now, yes, there's a time and place to remove foods that are harming you or causing symptoms or making your condition worse. But oftentimes I look at people's diets and I'm like, we have a lot of room to add in more food that is going to benefit you. And I think that also makes it easier because it's less about restricting, it's more about healing and nourishing. And that I think is refreshing for a lot of people who have been on this yo yo diet, chronic dieting path for probably, most of their life.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm so kind of against calorie counting culture, because it's not that calorie counting can't work for certain people. It's not that it can't be a tool or it plays a role,
Mm-hmm.
or there's not certain science behind it. But most of us, not all of us, but most of us, when we're pursuing calories, there are weird shortcuts we can do that get us into hitting a certain calories that aren't really choosing the best, highest nutrient dense foods for us. We're choosing
Mm-hmm.
foods that are often low in nutrient density but are low in calorie. And
Mm-hmm.
that was my story. I mean, think of all of us who, and I'm probably, because I'm showing my age here a little bit, but I remember we would eat the lean cuisines. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, but these are so low calorie. And so we'd have our microwave lean cuisine. And first of all, it was not satiating. Second of all, how many nutrients was I really getting? Probably very little. And yet it was meeting my calorie quota,
Yep.
quote unquote quotient. Um, so let's talk some of the other things around blood sugars. I notice you do talk about that, and I really, really think this is the future of health, is that people even if you are not diabetic, even if you are not a gestational diabetes patient, whatever, that we get to know our blood sugars better. And I talk about that on the podcast. What role do you feel that blood sugars play with people's thyroid, and what advice would you like to give to people who maybe are like, blood sugars, that's just for people who are pre-diabetic or have type 2 or type 1. I don't need to worry about my blood sugars.
Yeah, I can give a personal story about how my revelation of how the importance of stable blood sugar. So, this was again back in college, studying to be a dietitian. And I just remember, and I was probably, not eating enough for my body. Even though as a dietitian, it's an easy thing to fall into. But, if I went more than 2 or 3 hours without eating something, I felt like a completely different person. I was irritable, nauseous, I'd have a headache coming on. And if I was out doing something, like I'd have to go home if I didn't have food with me. And I don't know why, but I never really made the connection that, oh, I'm hypoglycemic right now and my body is crying out for the proper fuel. I was undiagnosed at this time, but I pretty much know that, I had Hashimoto's likely a decade before I was diagnosed, just based on my results when I had it tested and how far along, is pretty advanced. So I was likely struggling with thyroid issues, way earlier, and that can influence your ability to manage blood sugar levels as well. Thyroid hormones play a role with insulin. Insulin is a hormone that controls blood sugar levels, and if the blood sugar or the glucose can be utilized by your cells. And hypoglycemia is a common thing that I see with people who have hypothyroidism. And if that's not managed better, that can start to cause issues with your cortisol levels, because as your blood sugar drops, your body's response is to release a stress hormone called cortisol. Cortisol helps to release glucose from, if you have a glycogen storage, release the storage form of glucose to balance out the levels. But this can be a unfun game of like chasing proper levels versus managing and preventing those drops from happening in the first place. And those swings are going to make you feel miserable. It's not ideal for your physiology. Your body loves being in a state of homeostasis or equilibrium internally. So you will feel your best when your levels are more balanced. And when they're not, like I said, I kind of listed off some of the common symptoms, but people call it hangriness. Like that's a real, very real thing where, you're nauseous and you're shaky, hungry, maybe anxious, headaches. And that's your body's way of telling you have waited far too long to nourish, and now blood sugar levels are in an unfavorable place. So kind of staying ahead of that is an advice I give, staying ahead of your hunger, making sure you're eating consistently. And I work with a lot of busy moms. And I tell them you have to stop eating your kids' leftovers and work on having a real meal for yourself. And I know it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's necessary if you want to support your body, and eat real meals and snacks, every few hours. And everyone's a little different with, how long they can go, but not waiting until you're in the danger zone, basically.
Yeah, something that's been interesting for me on my journey is that I've been able to go longer, get less hangry by just eating more real meals. And I think that's what you've nailed there, is that a lot of moms, we are the most guilty here, I believe. We drink our coffee all day, sip on our coffee, which we need to talk about coffee too, but we sip on our coffee all day. We eat our kids' leftovers. We grab a protein bar. Maybe we have a smoothie. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad and can't play a role, but it's very rare that I see, hey, I'm going to make a really good salad with some chicken, with some salmon, with some whatever your protein is. I'm going to have that with some veggie. I'm going to make sure it tastes good. I'm going to add whatever I want, maybe some avocado, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to eat it and enjoy it. And once I did that more and more and got healthier and healthier, my hangriness went more and more away. And then I didn't need to snack as much, and I could go longer, but I used to not be able to. And I would just be like raging hungry. So I think that if you are early in your journey, I find that it's very normal to be hangry all the time. But the healthier
Mhm.
you get, it's like, oh, especially if you're eating the right food and not the
Mhm.
3 noodles of macaroni cheese that's at the bottom of your toddler's bowl.
Right. No, 100%. I've experienced that too. Like eating the right meals will help you be able to go longer without being dependent on, eating something, which is really nice because it's really annoying to feel so dependent on eating and to prevent you from feeling awful. But if you support your body, your hormones balance and they're more efficient. You might improve your insulin sensitivity, and things are a lot easier once you establish those habits.
So let's talk about coffee. So
Mm-hmm.
I drink coffee. I drink a lot of decaf. I just actually like the taste of coffee. I'm weird. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I do find that a lot of moms, when they realize, and dads too, and people that aren't mom and dads, they realize that maybe their coffee consumption has slowly increased.
Mm-hmm.
And once they realize that maybe that could be problematic on their health journey, they cut it back a little bit and they see some positive changes. Do you ever see people that coffee is affecting their thyroid health?
Oh, all the time. I have a lot I could say about coffee. It's such a big question people have, both coffee and alcohol.
Mhm.
I get asked a lot. And I tell them there's a healthy way to do it, and then there's a way that could be sabotaging your health progress. So, when it becomes a problem, like you said, is when people are skipping meals or over relying on caffeine. They have a poor sleep schedule. They might also be struggling with anxiety and blood sugar issues. They're super stressed. Like, you really shouldn't, caffeine can add fuel to the fire. So, you shouldn't be, going on coffee all day long. It's kind of pushing your body out of a state of balance because you have the stimulant constantly being,
Mhm.
consumed. So scaling back, I tell all my patients, I'm like, you're an adult. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to tell you why it might be beneficial to make some changes. So reducing caffeine intake, almost, I would say like 95% of the time, people report better energy, better
Mhm.
GI health. They don't have as much distress going on with their digestive systems. Their anxieties, reducing, better sleep, which
Mhm.
improves everything. So I tell people this, I love coffee. I love the smell, the taste, the routine, the ritual of it, all of it. My husband and I were huge coffee people, but there have been periods of my life where I've completely taken a break, and I feel
Mhm.
usually very good. Now, when I do drink coffee, it's a glass, a mug a day. I don't go beyond that. I try to stick to it in the morning after some sort of meal, to kind of slow the release of the stimulant, effect of it.
Mhm.
And when I was pregnant and now nursing, I'm more cautious about caffeine intake. So I always encourage people, take a break, few weeks, a month, see how you feel. It's all about self experimentation. It's about trial and error and figuring out what your body best responds to. And for most people too, it's just about finding a substitute, whether it's a caffeine
Mhm.
free or some decaf, so they can still enjoy the aspect of drinking a beverage, whether it's hot or iced or what have you. Um, but people get so reliant, they think, well, I need this for energy. And it's like, actually, you might have more energy without it. And
Yes.
people don't believe me until they give it a try.
Yeah, I think that's so huge. I'm just going to leave that there. I hope everybody kind of takes a maybe could think of taking a break, because I've taken breaks
Mm-hmm.
or I've said I'm going to reduce, and you do feel better. And there's also an empowering moment where you're like, I don't need caffeine to wake up in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell all the listeners out there, the healthier you get, you do not need caffeine to wake up in the morning. Yes, it feels good and it's a nice little surge and all the things, but we shouldn't have to have it in the morning. And
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate that. So, what about, we are going to talk about the other beverage that you mentioned. What about alcohol on thyroid health? And what are some things that you like to share with people?
Yeah. So alcohol, again, I have no problems with drinking alcohol. A lot of my clients really enjoy alcohol socially or to wind down. And I think for any food or beverage, there's an aspect of the pleasure of it,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
social aspect. And that is part of a healthy lifestyle too. So it's all about, finding that balance for you. I don't really like the saying everything in moderation, because what does that even mean? Like, define moderation. I like
Right.
to more so teach, you got to figure out what's going to work for you. So for alcohol, again, it kind of depends on where the patient's at. I've had patients drink quite a bit of alcohol and also have gut issues and dysbiosis and blood sugar problems and maybe some stress on their liver. Then I recommend, after educating them, let's scale back or even go a period without it. Let's work on these
Mm-hmm.
issues, because alcohol is a known toxin. It's,
Yeah.
too much is a bad thing. A little bit may have its health benefits. I always hear the argument, well, wine has resveratrol and that's a polyphenol. And I'm like, oh, well, so do fruits and vegetables. So you can't really use that argument too much. You can get antioxidants elsewhere. But, if someone has it, alcohol socially, they're making good choices with it, it's not impacting their health negatively, then yeah, maybe it's adding to their health versus taking away. The other thing with my clientele specifically is a lot of them do, at least for some period, try to be gluten free, or maybe they need to be. So then we
Mm-hmm.
have aspects of like beer and certain liquors that have gluten. And then, cocktails and wine, those have sugar. So you have to be aware of what you're consuming. And the caloric value of alcohol is sometimes more than what people realize. Just a little basic nutrition: protein and carbs have 4 calories per gram, fat has 9 calories per gram, and alcohol has 7. So alcohol has a lot of, it's pretty energy dense when you think about it in that relation.
Mm-hmm.
So, that too, if someone is trying to improve, their caloric balance or intake, sometimes they don't realize that, alcohol may be sabotaging their efforts. So really, it's all about education and then giving that to the patient or the client and letting them, decide. Like I said, I work with adults, so it's really up to them in the end what changes they're willing to make for the betterment of their health.
Yeah, and I tell on this podcast I drink alcohol, but I have found a ton of health benefits by reducing the amount of alcohol that we drink.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband would say the same. We're not out judging people. We are, like you said, we're all adults, but it's a topic that's avoided. And so these poor listeners on this show know that I talk about it a lot, because I do think that there are a lot of people out there that are trying to do all the things for their health, and yet they're not willing to look at some of the beverages that they drink, whether it's coffee,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's diet sodas, whether it's alcohol. And I'm putting the mirror up to me too. Like, these are all things that I enjoy. And, I've shared that, I love Diet Coke. I wish I could drink it all the time. I know it's not great for me. I know it's not the best choice. Um, and so I think your advice on taking a break, reducing, but I've really found that taking a break for a while really it gives you that feeling of what you feel like without it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can do it for a month or for a few weeks, it gives your body a chance to show you how much better you feel. Now, the first week you might be like, I miss it, or this, or that habit was there. But
Mm-hmm.
gosh, no one usually comes back to me after taking a break of any of those things after 30 days and go, yeah, I feel worse.
Right. No,
You know?
definitely. And something
Um,
else too, like in relation to coffee and alcohol, just like some people use coffee to wake up, I also have some people using alcohol to soothe and help them wind down and maybe even sleep, which
mm,
it's actually known that alcohol prevents deep sleep and better quality sleep. So it might make you sleepy, but then it's kind of like, what are you masking? Do you have poor sleep habits? Is there something else going on? So, I don't want people to self medicate with, overly so or excessively with alcohol or coffee, because it's just covering an underlying issue that probably needs to be addressed.
Oh, that's so important. And I just love that you say that, because how many people will tell you, oh, I just have a drink because it helps me fall asleep, or
Mm-hmm.
it's helping my anxiety. I feel
Yep.
stressed out. And both of those things, the science and the research show that to not be the case. Yes, it might help you fall asleep quicker,
Mm-hmm.
but your actual quality of sleep is lessened. And then the cycle continues. You need more coffee,
Yep.
and then by nighttime your body's just all out of whack. So anything, whether beverages or food or anything you're using as a band-aid, it's really important to figure out, like you said, what's the underlying issue here that
Mm-hmm.
we need to address. So gosh, we've just hit on so many things that I'm just like, I could just marinate on all this. What are just a couple other lifestyle tweaks that you recommend when you see people that you don't think are shared about enough?
Yeah, I think another one that I almost always talk about too is movement. So I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
personal trainer, so I do not give out specific plans. But when people come to me, we do talk about exercise and activity. They might tell me one of two things. It's rarely where it needs to be, but sometimes. So they'll either tell me I work out 5 days a week for an hour, I do this intense thing and this intense thing. Might be HIIT exercise, might be CrossFit, running, or they're telling me I'm too busy, I don't work out at all, I don't do anything, I just
Mm-hmm.
have my daily life to take care of. So both ends of the spectrum are not good. Too much exercise is going to cause that cortisol imbalance. It can impede healing, it can disrupt thyroid hormones. So it's important not to overdo it, but also you don't want to underdo it, because we know that movement is super beneficial. I try to tell people, think of exercise for all of the other health benefits, not specifically to make you lose weight. Nutrition is
Mm-hmm.
really your best bet for losing weight. Exercise has many other, your health benefits and your metabolic and your bone health and all these things. So we kind of try to find a happy medium, and again, make those small changes. So if someone's not doing any type of exercise, I say, can you commit to 10 minutes of walking a day? And they're like, well, yeah, of course. I'm like, great, we're just going to start there. And if someone is over exercising, I kind of assess that by, what's your recovery like? Are you able to recover? Do you have exercise intolerance? Like, how do you feel if it's taking you a very long time to bounce back? There's a good chance you're overdoing it. And let's scale back and find styles of movement that are going to be more, beneficial for you.
Oh, I love that. I think that's so important. And I'm really trying, I sit for my job, I sit at a desk, and I really like to talk about, hey, it doesn't always have to be getting to a gym. It can
Mm-hmm.
be taking a break and doing some squats behind you. It can be going for a walk. It can be,
Mm-hmm.
hey, jumping on the trampoline with the kids. It's incorporating movement, because if you think of how our ancestors lived, they were always moving to do everything. They had to move to get
Mm-hmm.
their food. They had to move to get, I mean, anything in their life. They moved for their homes. I mean, they were on the go. And our lives are becoming more and more sedentary.
Yep.
Everything's being delivered to us. Everything's, we don't have to walk to go get the milk at the store. We get it delivered by Instacart. And so I love thinking like, I've got to try that much harder to incorporate movement in my day, but
Mm-hmm.
incorporating movement in my day doesn't mean I need to run a marathon. It's it's
Right.
that it's that balance, and I think that's exactly what you hit on. Um, well, Lisha, we could talk all day. I know you have a 3-month-old, and who is probably patiently waiting with your husband for his mom. But where can people connect with you and find out more about thyroid health, and maybe sign up for one of your courses? Where can they find you?
Yeah, the easiest place is Instagram. That's probably my largest audience and the easiest. I find most people do have an Instagram. It's Lisha thyroid RD. I think that you're going to put it in the notes for people to find me if that's easier
Mm-hmm.
too. I also have a website and email, but really Instagram's the easiest for if you want to message me or if you want a lot of free content as far as education on my page. I also have free resources that you can find through Instagram as well.
Great. Oh, Lisha, this has been so helpful. So thank you for your time. And I love ending the interview with kind of a bold advice that you have for the listeners. And these, to be honest, these are my favorite. I should take these and put these at the front of the episode because there's such wisdom from all of my guests. So what would you like to share? What's your bold advice?
Oh, there's honestly so much. I think the past few years have really been so transformative for myself, becoming a mom and my everything with my private practice and business. But really, it's just you're so much more capable than you believe you are. I have learned that time and time again for just going for things. I don't always love going outside my comfort zone, but when I do, like the payoff and the reward at the end is always amazing. Even if it's a failure, it still gives me one step closer to where I want to be or where I need to be. So whether that was, having our baby, that's a big scary
Mm-hmm.
thing, or having a solo practice and being an entrepreneur during COVID, like that was a scary thing to invest in myself and do that. But you really start to realize like what you're able to do, and it's so amazing. You grow that way, and oftentimes you will either inspire other people or help other people by just kind of taking those risks and taking those chances. So that's just go for it, trust yourself, and just see what happens.
I love that because really, at the end of the day, often the only person limiting us is ourselves. And
Yes.
it's our own mindset, which you said at the beginning of this interview, that's where we need to start. And
Mhm.
our mindset, there's so much capability out there. And you're showing that with all you're doing. So thank you for inspiring us because you nailed it. If we are pursuing our dreams and not thinking in this limited mindset, it helps others kind of release their limited mindset too. It really
Yes.
does.
Mhm.
Ah, well, thank you, Lisha, for your time. I can't wait to maybe have you back someday because we could talk thyroid a lot. But bless you, and you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. This has been great and my pleasure to talk to you and your audience today.
Sure. There we go. I think I stopped it. Did I stop it? I can't see if nope. Didn't.